The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee.
I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the resolution under consideration.
Without objection.
And I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the news today of Dorothy Heights' passing, we have now lost 2 significant civil rights leaders in less than 1 week. Today in Memphis, Memphians and others throughout the country will have the opportunity to pay respects to Reverend Benjamin Hooks during a public viewing and visitation at Greater Middle Baptist Church, where he pastored for 52 years. Yesterday in Detroit, Michigan, Reverend Hooks was honored at Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church, where he also pastored for some 40 years in the Detroit area. A native Memphian, Reverend Hooks was one of the golden-throated warriors of the spoken word and one of the few silver-tongued giants of oratory. Dr. Hooks was born in 1925 and was the 5th of 7 children born to Robert B. and Bessie Hooks. His grandmother, Julia B. Hooks, was the 2nd African-American female college graduate in the nation after graduating from Berea College in Kentucky in 1874. Following in her footsteps, Dr. Hooks attended Lemoyne College, now part of Lemoyne-Owen, in Memphis, Tennessee, where he studied pre-law. He continued his studies at Howard University here in Washington, and then later at DePaul University in Chicago, where he received a law degree. It was unfortunate that when he decided to go to law school, that there was not a law school in Tennessee that accepted African Americans, and for that reason, Dr. Hooks traveled to Chicago. After graduation from college, before law school, he entered the Army during World War II, and he had a job of guarding Italian prisoners. The prisoners were able to eat in restaurants that were off limits to him because he was African American. This experience, humiliating as it was, deepened his determination to do something about bigotry, not just in the South, but in our country, as our armed forces were segregated and our African American soldiers fighting for our freedoms were not allowed freedoms that prisoner of wars enjoyed. Dr. Hooks returned to Memphis after being discharged at the end of the war with the rank of staff sergeant. He began practicing law in Memphis in 1949, one of the few African Americans practicing law in Memphis. In 1954, he appeared on a round table with late Justice Thurgood Marshall, then Attorney Thurgood Marshall, and other Southern African American attorneys to formulate a possible litigation strategy before the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, the landmark case that ended separate but equal and started the end of segregation in our nation. Dr. Hooks served as an assistant public defender in Shelby County from 1961 to 1965, and in 1965 he was appointed by Governor Frank Clement to be criminal court judge in Shelby County, and he became the first African-American criminal court judge in the state of Tennessee. In 1956, while serving in the Baptist ministry at Greater Middle Baptist in Memphis, he joined the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., about the time that Dr. King in Montgomery was starting the boycotts of the downtown stores in Montgomery and working with Rosa Parks and boycotting the buses, leading to the great civil rights uprisings and movement in the South that made our nation a more perfect union. President Nixon appointed Dr. Hooks to the Federal Communications Commission in 1972, and he served from 1972 to 1977 and was the first African-American appointed commissioner, and there he wanted to make sure that African-Americans had the opportunity to have ownership interest in radio and television and other opportunities that they didn't previously have. In 1977, when he left the Federal Communications Commission, he did so to become the executive director and the chief executive officer of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In 1977, at that same time, Dr. Hooks' nephew, Michael Hooks, and I were serving in the Tennessee State Constitutional Convention. And we drafted a resolution to invite Dr. Hooks to address the Tennessee Constitutional Convention, Limited Convention of 1977, the first African-American ever asked to address the joint legislative body in the state of Tennessee. While Dr. Hooks served as executive director of the NAACP, he fought for affirmative action, led efforts to end apartheid in South Africa, and addressed racism in sports, and dealt with the Rodney King trial in Los Angeles. He was awarded the Spingarn Medal from the NAACP, its highest honor. Reverend Hooks served as chairman and the board of directors of the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, my hometown, and his as well. He taught at the University of Memphis, where the Benjamin L. Hooks Institute for Social Change was established in his honor in 1996. He made a significant personal financial contribution to that particular institute, and commented to me one time that it was appropriate and right and proper that when African Americans have been able to secure monies and savings, that they make contributions to their society, and he was able to do that. A first generation of wealth that was able to contribute to civic causes, and he was proud to be a leader in that cause as well. I was president in 2007 and honored to be in the White House when President Bush awarded Dr. Hooks the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Most recently, he gave one of his last lectures on civil rights and social justice as part of the premier lecture series of the Benjamin Hooks Institute for Social Change of the University of Memphis here in our Judiciary Committee room in the Rayburn House Office Building. It was October 6, 2009. Several members of Congress were present and other interested parties in D.C. and on the Hill. And he was accompanied on that occasion, as he was on so many occasions, by his beautiful and jovial bride, Frances. Frances Dancy was a teacher, and she met Ben Hooks at a Shelby County fair. Ben Hooks was a lucky man because he found the perfect bride. Frances was by his side and gave up her career as a teacher. She gave up that career to be the first lady of the church, whether it was Mount Moriah, New Mount Moriah in Detroit, or Great Old Middle Baptist in Memphis, whether on Lamar or in Knight Arnold. They were married in 1952. They renewed their vows for the third time after nearly 50 years of marriage on March 24, 2001. She has encouraged him in all of his endeavors, and she will see that his memory is maintained and preserved in an appropriate fashion. Dr. Hooks was one of the greatest civil rights icons in American history and a community leader in Memphis and a friend to many in this Congress. He's survived by his beautiful and devoted wife, Frances, his daughter, Patricia Gray, grandchildren, and a nephew in particular, Michael Hooks, who served in public office, and a grandnephew, Michael Hooks, who also served in public office. His funeral will be tomorrow in Memphis, Tennessee, at Bountiful Blessings, the head of the church that is the flagship church of the Church of God in Christ in Memphis, where Superintendent Hawkins presides and was previously presided over by his was a life well lived. I thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I yield my...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to comment. I appreciate Representative Poe's comments. He was a former criminal court judge, and like Judge Hooks was a criminal court judge, they share that experience. I keep under my desk, under the glass on my desk, a picture that was taken of Benjamin Hooks as a lawyer with Russell Sugarman and A.W. Willis. I believe it was A.A. Ladding and S.A. Wilburn, appearing in city court in Memphis and defending individuals in Memphis charged with violations of the law that were Jim Crow laws. It's an historic picture that people in Memphis know well. And they stood up in a courtroom with just about predominance of policemen around there and white visitors into the courtroom. But they stood for justice, and they stood up. Leaders in Memphis like Maxine Smith and Russell Sugarman are getting older, but they continue the fight as Reverend Hooks has. He had a difficult last few days, but he knew his time had come and he was at peace. He tried to make it to the inaugural, to see the inauguration of the first African-American president, Barack Obama, and he was here. I think the weather was such and the conditions he wasn't able to make it to the inauguration, but he made a point of coming here and wanted to participate. He was bipartisan. He came of an era when many African Americans in the South, if not most, were members of the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln. And he maintained a Republican allegiance through his appointments by President Nixon and a closeness to Senator Baker and others, but also had Democratic roots. President Bush recognized his talents, as has President Obama and President Clinton. And he supported Hillary Clinton for president because he'd been close to the Clinton family. But he was happy to see America come to the time when an African American could be elected president, as Dr. King had wanted that time to come, that people were judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And we saw part of that resolution in 2008, and Ben Hooks was pleased to be able to see it. As I said, he'll be buried tomorrow at Bountiful Blessings, where G.E. Patterson served as Bishop of Kojic, and I know there'll be many people from around the world there to honor him. I would like to thank my friend John Conyers, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, who worked with me on this resolution and was unfortunately absent because of other commitments. He was very close to Reverend Hooks in Detroit and other places in fighting for civil rights over the years. I would also like to commend the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Lamar Smith, for joining me in co-sponsoring this resolution. And if I could, I'd like to yield some time to Chairman Towns of New York. As much
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for joining and relating those parts of Dr. Hooks' life. He was, as I said, a great orator who took the Southern tradition of politics and the ministry and wove it into a manner of speech that was unrivaled. And to his last days could deliver a sermon or a speech that was unparalleled. He'll be buried tomorrow at Elmwood Cemetery, where my father's buried and where I suspect I'll be buried, and we'll spend eternity together. I urge my colleagues to support this important resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.